Right now, there's a good chance that the way you think about your binge eating problem is a part of why you still feel stuck in it. Most people I work with see this as a battle, as a part of themselves that is just self-destructive, self-sabotaging, and they need to overcome it. In this video, I want to offer another way of thinking about this problem, a way that I believe actually helps to make progress with it. One of the most common beliefs that people hold about themselves when they have this problem is that binge eating is somehow some kind of personal and moral failing. They believe that they lack willpower, that they're just inconsistent, they're out of control. They see themselves as having this problem of binge eating, but almost like it's part of who they are. Now, I'm not going to minimize binge eating as a problem. I know from lived experience how distressing it can be. I know if you're watching my videos, binge eating has become a problem for you. But binge eating as a behavior normally starts out as a solution, which means it was and maybe is trying to help you. I'm not commenting on whether it is helping you, but that it is trying to. In effect, it is a short-term solution, often to a long-term problem. Binge eating tends to offer some kind of relief in the moment, but over a period of time, it starts to feel pretty self-destructive. So the first question that anyone who has this problem needs to be asking themselves is, what problem is this binge eating behavior, or was this binge eating behavior trying to solve? Now, the was helping and is helping is an important distinction to make, because the reasons why it started versus the reasons why it continued can look very different. For example, my binge eating problem started at around the time that I developed a chronic health condition called hypopituitarism. It threw my hormones out of whack, so I felt hungry all the time. My primal brain believed that I was starving, even though I wasn't. So my binge eating started because my brain believed it was a solution to needing to be fed. When some of those physical symptoms calmed down a bit and it was better managed, I was left with basically a sense of my whole, not just my life, but my whole sense of myself had been turned upside down. My body had changed physically and internally in terms of how I felt. I had all kinds of beliefs about myself, like why I was still struggling with food. And for me then, binge eating became about checking out for a long period of time. I didn't want to have to face my new reality of trying to manage this chronic health condition. I was in a state of resistance to even dealing with it. So I used food to numb. Moving on from that, as I started to find some more acceptance that I needed to figure out how to live my life, one of the main symptoms that people with hypopituitarism experience is fatigue, low energy, and like a type of inertia. It's hard to get your body going. And so then food would step in then, and food would be a way of trying to mobilize myself. My nervous system was depressed, and food was used to try and activate. So I would have sworn to you at the time that the biggest problem in my life was the binge eating problem, because it was a problem. I didn't like how it made me feel, and I was concerned about the effects it was having on my health. Ultimately, binge eating is usually trying to regulate something. I'm not talking about how effective it is, I'm talking about what it's trying to do. But the urges to binge tend to come from the primal brain. So the primal brain perceives there is a problem that can be fixed by binge eating. And now your primal brain has learned to trigger these binge urges in response to certain situations. So there's usually three main things that binge eating is trying to help with. Number one, it's trying to feed you. So that could be in response to a history of restriction. The frustrating part about this one is some people have a history way back when of restriction. They don't feel like they've restricted for a while, but the binge urges keep getting triggered because they keep experiencing that urgency around food, because it's like the primal brain isn't quite convinced, isn't quite assured that food is going to come regularly. So the first one is to feed. And then the second one is to numb or avoid. We are here as human beings living these lives that can be incredibly challenging at times, and food can offer a way to just check out, especially when you pair it with a screen. Food can slow our minds down, it can take our minds off things, it serves as a type of distraction. And so I think it's helpful when we're talking about the more emotional uses of food to make the distinction with something like numbing or avoiding versus trying to get you into balance. So trying to get you into balance could look like Eating to try to manage a mood. So if you're feeling anxious, you might binge, and that triggers the parasympathetic nervous system. So your body feels calmer and safer, even if your mind is spinning out because you just binged. And on the flip side of that, if you're someone more prone to depression, food can be a way of trying to mobilize, to get energy in, to try and get some kind of spike, some kind of dopamine, the neurochemicals of motivation going, so that you can go and do the things you want to do in life. Now, you might be like me and you might have all three. I had all three, and my relationship with food kind of evolved over time. So sometimes when people will say to me, how long did it take to recover from binge eating? It was this sort of evolvement. I felt like I was trying to recover from the moment that I started. But mine was much more gradual than the more dramatic recovery stories you hear where someone says, I just went all in and then my binge eating went away. Or I just read the intuitive eating book and then I never binged again. And for those of you who feel like there's more layers to your binge eating than that, like I hear you, like I really have been there. So when I'm talking about thinking about this problem differently, your binge eating problem is not trying to destroy you. Your binge eating problem doesn't say anything about who you are. Your binge eating problem is your brain believing that binge eating is a solution to something. And I say your brain believing that. I don't say you believing that. For some of you, it might be like, yeah, no, I believe that. I do believe that my compulsive eating is a way of, addressing this problem. Many people don't feel like that. They feel like they're binge eating. They don't understand why, because it doesn't seem to actually be helping. So we're distinguishing between your brain that can trigger the binge urges and the part of you that you often think of as you, which is our prefrontal cortex, where our thinking and our decision making happens. The motivation to binge eat for many people actually comes from the primal brain, not the prefrontal cortex, which is why just making promises to yourself that you're going to do it differently doesn't tend to work. So I know that if you're binge eating and watching my videos, you don't want to have this problem and you're upset that you have this problem. But if we start from this possibility that your binge eating is trying to help, that is trying to be your ally, not your enemy, imagine how differently you might be able to interact with the part of you that keeps wanting to binge if you saw it as trying to help you. For example, if some kid is trying to help you do a task, and because they're a kid, they're just slowing everything down and making it worse, and they're not really helping, you can see the intention behind that. You can see and appreciate that that kid is trying to help. So you're going to respond to that kid very differently than if you truly believe that kid is out to sabotage you and ruin everything for you. So you might think, okay, I know what problem my binge eating is trying to solve, but what do I do about it if my brain continues to believe that binge eating is the solution? Well, when we've identified the problem, underneath the binge eating, that's where your attention and focus needs to be. But often our focus stays on the binging behavior. I know that we can't fix all our problems in life. So ultimately it's about, well, it's the serenity prayer, isn't it? The courage to change the things that you can change. The serenity to accept the things that you cannot change. And then the wisdom to know the difference. And so my offering, which very much comes off the back of Eckhart Tolle's teaching, which is about offering non-resistance. So it's not resisting your problems and your circumstances. What do I mean by that? So with my health condition, resistance sounds like I'm pushing back against the idea that I even have this health condition. Many people can relate to this when it comes to their body. The resistance is that constantly telling yourself that your body isn't how it is supposed to be because you're getting in a fight with reality. Now, I quite like the term non-resistance versus actually using the word acceptance. I've moved away a bit more from that because acceptance is confusing for people. Acceptance feels like giving up. Acceptance feels like, well, if I accept, nothing can change. But non-resistance is going, it is the way it is. And now what is actually within my power and my influence right now? So having problems in life, there's always twofold. It's like, one, what can we do to help ourselves with this problem? And then two, how can we better cope with it? How can we offer non-resistance to the parts that we can't change or that we can't change right now? When binge eating remains a battle, because there is a part of you that is drawn towards binging or does this binging behavior, when you battle with your binge eating, you battle with yourself. And because you are both sides of that battle, you'll never win. Most people I meet have this kind of sense of that they are exhausted and they're trying so hard, and at the same time feeling like they're not trying hard enough. They're in this unwinnable place. And quite often, if you've been trying to change your behavior or doing something about a problem and you haven't been able to, what is often required is a shift in perspective. When we see things differently, when we have an emotional shift, new possibilities, new choices start to open up. So let me know in the comments below, how do you see this problem? Have I convinced you to look at this problem differently? And what problem do you think your binge eating might be a solution to? I'll leave it there for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.